Hi everyone, I'm Alana and you're watching my top 10 games of last generation, being the Xbox 360 and PS3, and this is the hardest video that I have ever had to make. To make things a little bit easier on myself, this list is not in any order because that would just ruin my life. So instead of choosing what may be technically the best game or my favourite games even, I've actually just picked the games that I think stand out as games that I would recommend that have come out for the past generation. Number 10, and remember this doesn't mean it's the 10th on the list, it's just the one that I'm mentioning first, is Fallout 3. And I mentioned Fallout 3 not because I just love the humour and the dialogue options and the weird cheeky things you can say to people, but more than anything for the exploration in this game. One of the most impressive moments in any video game is when you first leave the vault in Fallout 3 and you see the wasteland for the first time, and it's just this barren, empty, nuclear-riddled, radiation-full wasteland of people turning against each other and trying to survive. Number 9 is Assassin's Creed 2. Now, I probably preferred Brotherhood as a game. I really liked the renovation system and I think the open world sort of format was a little bit refined, but Assassin's Creed 2 is definitely the most unique of the Assassin's Creed games. When it first came out, it was amazing and awe-inspiring. I will never, ever forget how I felt and how I was yelling at my mum to shut up at the ending of Assassin's Creed 2 when you race through the Vatican, you track down the Pope, and then you meet one of the people who came before, and it was just the most beautiful thing. 8 is Dark Souls. The appeal of Dark Souls isn't in the story or in the exploration, even though it is quite a pretty game. It is in the difficulty. You try over and over and over again to kill a boss and you lose all your souls, and it's extremely frustrating, but doubly as satisfying as probably anything else I've ever played when you succeed. There are a lot of arguments in the games industry which is more important between gameplay and story, and if something that's just story focused is even a game, or if it's just some kind of interactive movie. But Dark Souls, hands down, does one of the best jobs in the entire history of mankind of making you play for the combat and making the combat so alluring, because it really is like a dance by the end of the game. 7 is Uncharted 2. Now, I'm not even sure why I've picked Uncharted 2. I suppose it felt a lot more polished than Uncharted 1, and for some reason the campaign was a little bit more engrossing than Uncharted 3, but all of them are really, really great games. I think Uncharted 2 specifically is really for the sense of decay and helplessness, though even though you're Nathan Drake, who's this handsome, extremely confident guy, he constantly feels like he's not in control of anything, or you feel like you're never in control of anything, and I think that's really, really appealing in this kind of game. 6 is Left 4 Dead 2. Now, Left 4 Dead, of course, is very different to these other games in that it isn't really a great game to play by yourself. It's more of a co-op game, but when you are playing Left 4 Dead 2 in co-op, it's so much fun. There's nothing story-focused about this game. You've just got hordes of zombies running at you and an array of different weapons, and you have to basically help out all your teammates to get to the end of these extremely crescendoing campaigns where things just get harder and harder and harder as you go along. I say Left 4 Dead 2 instead of Left 4 Dead 1 because Left 4 Dead 2 sort of has objective. Number 5 is Mass Effect. Now, the reason for that more than anything is that you actually feel like you're influencing everything that happens. You get to choose who's on your squad, on your ship, and every interaction you have with them sort of affects what they do and how they feel. Of course, there's the combat and there's fighting through things to actually get to a point where you need to make a massive decision, but those decisions do weigh on you really heavily, and there's a lot of the time where I was just staring at the screen thinking, I could ruin everything. But there was one point in Mass Effect that really stands out to me where my favourite character in the game, my favourite buddy, ended up getting shot by another one of the people on my team, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but I'm sure most of you have played it, and I was furious. A lot of people just say, why don't you just reload your save? But that's not an authentic experience, and I wouldn't have the same feeling that I still have now that he died and I'm mad. But realistically that happened because of me and the choices I made leading up to that point, and it had a really big effect on me because Mass Effect really does give you a lot of freedom in a way that a lot of other games don't. 4 is Bioshock 1. Now, of course, Bioshock Infinite is hugely popular, but I still say that Bioshock 1 is the one that stuck with me the most. So aside from walking down decayed hallways that you can look out a massive window and see the ocean, which is awesome, the game is incredibly creepy. There are splicers, which are basically drug addicts who just want to kill you and jump at you, and some of them crawl on the ceiling, and sometimes you can just see a flicker of them in a shadow around a corner and you're just like, oh god, I have to go around there. It was just incredibly dark and messed up, and in such a pretty environment where everything seems so old-fashioned and fancy. It was a really, really interesting contrast. But the twist in that game was probably the best twist I've ever played in a game. Andrew Ryan is a phenomenal character, and the twist revolving around him and what he decides to do is just mind-blowing. 3 is The Last of Us, which came out this year, which is definitely worth a mention for the characters. I've never cared about characters as much as I have in The Last of Us. I've never wanted to experience a world so much or felt like I related to a world so much, even though it's nothing like the world I live in. While I didn't care too much for the gameplay, it was ridiculously intense all the time. You felt like you were going to throw up half the time. The game also has gorgeous environments and a lot of little touches that work really well, like notes that you can find around or just little bits of dialogue and facial expressions. Facial expressions were crazy in that game. It just feels like one of the most polished games ever made, and it probably gives one of the most influential experiences that any game has so far. 2 is Gears of War 2, and this is sort of a package deal. I'm sure that I would be one of the few people in the world who would mention Gears of War 2 on this kind of list, but I actually have read all of the Gears of War books, and I'm not really sure if that counts as cheating, but because I've read these books, I think that I probably love the game so much more than everyone else. So Gears of War 2 makes it on the list if you have also read the books, which are definitely worth reading. They developed the entire world so much more than it's developed in the game. Aside from the idea that a bunch of aliens are trying to sink the planet to sort of take it over, and the extremes that both of these opposing forces have to go to try and win, and they ultimately just keep failing. This game is ridiculously emotional because of the characters, and I don't even want to point out why, but it's... I was really upset. And we're down to number 1. And once again, this is not necessarily the number 1 game, it's just the last one that I'm mentioning, which probably means it's like the 10th one because it's the one I thought of last. And I don't know, because there's so many games that I want to mention. Like, I want to say GTA 5 because it's so big and the characters are freaking incredible, but I feel like it doesn't deserve to be on the list just yet with all this other more creative stuff. And then I want to mention so many fighting games which like stole all of my time, that there's too many of them and I can't decide which one I would mention. But the last game is going to have to be Far Cry 3, including Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon if I'm allowed to count that. I'm probably not, but I'm going to anyway. Far Cry 3 has impeccable gameplay. I use the stealth mechanics and the bow so often to get through this game, where you're on this island that's visibly beautiful and happy and island-y. But it has these really, really dark undertones. It almost feels like Batman's Arkham Asylum, where everything is just actually really messed up, and they have access to all these weird resources, like a lot of drugs like Scarecrow might have, to make things really, really interesting and kind of terrifying. So while you've got this gorgeous tropical island and pretty water and all this green stuff and lots of animals that want to kill you, the bad guy in this game, Vas Montenegro, is just so evil and quirky, and he just snaps in a second, and watching him alone is really, really, really unique. This was really, really hard for me, and I'm probably going to change my mind on this in like a minute from now. But that is it from me today, you guys. I'm Alana, you're watching Games HQ Media, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys next time.